So when I think about AI, and I don't know if I'm alone here, I immediately tend to be drawn to the cliches of thinking about AI as a personal and professional productivity tool, for my work. And I guess for most of us, at least for me, that's probably 30 to 40% of my lifetime though, right? The rest of the time, I spend in and around the places that I live and I rest and of course I work. And I'm talking about the physical and the social construct that we call cities. And in particular today, we're going to talk about smart cities. Welcome to the AI Forecast. I'm your host, Paul Muller, and I'd love you to join me along with leading companies and industry experts as we explore the past, the present, and the future of data and AI in the enterprise every week. And if you haven't already, you might have heard me mention this before, we'd love it if you could like, share, and subscribe. We really do appreciate the support that it brings. Speaking of support, a huge thanks, of course, to our show sponsor, Cloudera, for bringing this podcast to life. Well, anyway, back to the topic of smart cities. So the concept, I did a bit of research here. The concept of the smart city isn't new. People have been talking about smart cities all the way back to the 1800s. The great exhibitions were held throughout the world as governments tried to imagine how technology might shape the cities of the future. What is, of course, new are the technologies that were unimaginable to the public 2 centuries ago. Someone who has, however, spent time thinking about, writing about the future is today's guest, Dr. Ayesha Khanna. Dr. Khanna is the author of multiple books on business and technology, including her latest book, or her last book, I should say, Hybrid Reality, where she describes Pax Technologica and imagines how humanity and tech will co-evolve. She's also, as you might imagine, a highly successful entrepreneur, a strategic advisor, and a futurist helping the world's top companies and governments unlock the power of artificial intelligence through her company Addo, where she's CEO. And we're also going to talk, if I can get a chance, about her charity 21C Girls and her business Amplify and the work she's doing with mid-career women and professionals to help them thrive in a tech-driven future. Welcome to the podcast, Ayesha.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here. Now, I understand you're coming in via Singapore.
I am.
Are you a native Singaporean or?
I moved here 13 years ago. I grew up in Pakistan. Then I spent most of my adult life in the US. And then I moved over here and we love it. We're not going anywhere.
It's a fabulous part of the world. Hey, I'm really keen to talk. Well, speaking of smart cities too, probably one of the ones that comes to mind when I think about the future. But before we get into the topic, we do a little thing to warm up at the beginning of every episode. Call it the Fast Four. Call it what you will. It's always the same. Are you ready to play the game?
Absolutely. Let's start.
Let's do this thing. All right. First question, Ayesha. What would people who know you best say is your superpower?
Creativity. I think that's something that is becoming more and more important. All the plays that I wrote, the films I directed, the magazine I started, all of that is so useful now because nobody's just looking for an engineering solution for its own sake. What I help our clients think about is how to create solutions that really solve for the needs of their customers and their citizens. So it's actually come really in handy for me.
Well, we'll go from creativity to technology. What do you think, in your opinion, is the most impactful technology of all time? You can go as far back as you want.
I may be biased, but I have to say it's artificial intelligence. I've been working in this field since I was an undergraduate. We didn't even call it AI at that time. What I have seen, its ability to actually transform the very operating system of a company and the potential that it has, not only to improve productivity, but to actually transform, democratize access to basic services in a city, giving people the opportunity to go up the social mobility ladder. And then also not only looking at all its advantages for companies, but then also its potential to do harm and transform a perfectly good city, a perfectly sane individual, a good company into one that can't be trusted, that is problematic. I think it's wrong to think of transformative just as a beautiful, naive thing, but it can do both. And understanding and recognizing its weight in both capacities and managing it and reining it in and amplifying it where needed, that's its power. And I think it's very powerful in that sense.
You know, it's interesting. I'll go off topic for a second. Well, I'll amplify your topic. But the more you anthropomorphize technology, particularly AI, the more I at least counsel people to say, you know, the more human-like the responses we can get from technology, the more it brings with it the foible of the humans that created it. And I think it's you've put it far more eloquently than I did, but I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
Moving on. We talk about AI. Well, we're going to talk about AI and what it can do for cities today, but who cares about that, Ayesha? I want to know, what would you like to see AI do for you personally in your future? What's the one thing you wish that the engineers would just build to make your life easier?
You know, something that I really want them to do, and it will eventually make my life easier because I'll have awesome colleagues, is have personalized AI tutors all over the world that are completely subsidized, both through connectivity and compute by governments, that are localized to the culture and to the problems and aspirations of that country. Because I grew up seeing poor people not get the opportunities they wanted. And just by sheer luck, you and I are here. You and I could be somewhere different. And the injustice of that has always bothered me. And I think that just look at that potential. Can you imagine if I had like 10 million or even 10 more people who got access to this technology, could be my colleagues? It would benefit me in so many ways. Greater meaningful interactions, work, more money, more power, or just a more peaceful, happier life. For me, that would really help me. It's been something as a child that has bothered me, and I finally see the light at the end of this tunnel.
I think you're right. We can all have our own personalized Dr. Khan.
There you go. Dr.
There you
Khanna.
go. Yeah, exactly right.
If only everyone could be so lucky.
Yes, exactly right. A Khanna in my pocket. Last but not least, you know, we all work with data on a daily basis. Some of us are consciously incompetent with it. You know, some of us know we're not really very good at it. Some of us have developed a way of working with data unconsciously that makes us effective. What sort of conscious competence or conscious best practices have you learned as someone who works with data a lot?
I think there are just 4 important things when it comes to data. And it's the same thing. It's like rinse and repeat once you understand it. The first is you need to house the data in a way that is easily accessible. You want to do AI. Everybody wants to do AI now. It's like, I want to run a marathon, but I'm not going to train for it. You want to do AI, but you're not going to build your data muscles. It's not going to get you anywhere. You know, you're like crawling at the end towards the finish line if you make it there. The second thing is you have to involve the business. They're the ones who know what the data means. They all have different names for everything, gobbledygook, and, you know, it's not going to work. So if everybody wants to have one source of truth and they want to have the same understanding of the data, people really don't appreciate this is very important. That's why you can't just have data engineers like me who love data and are geeky running around with the data. You want the business and data team to have a partnership. The third thing that's really important is governance. You know, again, data in itself is important, but you need to govern it, not only in terms of privacy, but also so that it remains high quality, useful data. That is something that is not done enough. Now people are beginning to realize it, because not only we have regulations and compliance around data, but now we have regulations and compliance that will emerge around AI. And one of the ways to poison a perfectly good AI model is to poison its data. It's called data poisoning. So I think these 3 things are very important. And then is the fourth and the strongest or the weakest link, depending on, you know, how well versed he or she is. And that's the human. So you can have all of these plans around data. And then the board says it, the CEO says it, and then it's like you're stuck in quicksand, like nothing moves. Because there's a lack of appreciation that data is the core of the new modern organization and how it operates. And for that, you need to educate people that it's not going to replace them, the solutions that are built from it, but it's going to empower them. And that kind of cultural acceptance of working with data, enjoying data. I mean, I love data. I'm a total data geek, but enjoying data, working with it, seeing its potential, seeing it help you as a person and your team and your company. That's an emotional, psychological nurturing of your talent that needs to happen. And you can't hug them to it. You have to actually teach them and empower them. And that's why I do a lot of education. That's why I started this education company. So if you have those four, you're good to go. And you go and start working, building something great and experimenting.
So easy. There you go. Just that data. I've got to ask the question though, right? So you mentioned governance, and it's interesting because I've asked this question to, over 50 of our guests over the last year. Governance and data hygiene does come up a bit.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that's going through my mind is we talk about it a lot, but to your point, it doesn't seem to be practiced as much as we should be. Why do you think that is? I'm curious.
Unless people feel pain, like compliance or fines, or they feel incentivized through immediate rewards, they just put it on the back burner. Because we talk about data governance, but nobody invests in a proper data governance team. You take your existing team and make them double hat. They're already burnt out sometimes. They're working so hard. Now you've given them this glorious new title. They don't want it. They don't understand it. It's not going to, you have to show them how to help them in their career, how this is fundamental to actually progressing for the longevity of the firm. And if you ask me, the board should be included in this, because the one team that's going to think in very long cycles, because their duty is to represent the stakeholders in the long term, is the board. They will understand and they will support the management when it wants to invest in the right team. I think that's the reason. It's not that people don't want to. I think it's just they have a lot of other things and they need to be given the time to do it. When we've seen it work is when GDPR comes in or the California CCPA regulation is coming in. Now everybody is running around trying to do data lineage, auditability, provenance, all of these things that allow you to understand where your data is, how it moves across an organization. But there's so much upside in terms of how you can actually serve your customers better, be faster, be more agile. And in order to see that, you need to be exposed to its benefits in the long term. It just takes some time. You have to set up the processes and educate the right team for it.
Yeah, I think it's often seen as a punitive term, especially I think in the United States where the word government just sort of tends to have a negative connotation, whereas almost everyone I've spoken to is universally seen data governance as being a positive, accelerative thing. But as I say, for some reason, I think it's seen up there with sort of exercise, not smoking, and eating better. It's something I'll do tomorrow.
Right.
It's a branding problem. I think we've just cracked the code on this podcast. Hey, let's talk a bit about your background. I'm fascinated. Tell me a bit. We talked a little bit, obviously, about the countries you've lived in. Tell us a bit about your background.
Well, when I was growing up, I wanted to study development economics because I grew up in a poor country and I wanted to work on policies and mechanisms. And I worked in human rights and women's rights and inner city projects to help school children get education. That was a big dream of mine, to use development economic policies to help people reach kind of their potential and get equal opportunity to thrive in their lives. But then when I went to Harvard as an undergraduate, I met all of these people from Europe, like Estonians, Russians, Bulgarians, Romanians. I was in this wonderful gang who made me feel that computer science and mathematics was very creative, that it was kind of like the humanities and the social sciences. You could liberally think of it. Because I'd grown up in Asia thinking it's very deterministic. There's one answer and that's it. But they thought of it like poetry. They were always trying to come up with creative problems to solve. And so I really fell in love with it. And I fell in love with this new technology called neural networks, where, it would literally be like the hardware was beneath the desk and there was a very slow kind of neural network running. And once I got hooked on it, it was very hard for me to turn back. So then I did my master's in operations research and applied math. I joined Wall Street. I became a software engineer, and I started working on quant models that, physics PhDs would put together and I would implement. And, I remember all these second removed aunties and uncles back home would be like, oh my God, you've just joined the back office, why are you doing that? And I told them, I said, one day this back office is going to move to the front office. And that's, of course, what we saw in the coming decade. And then after working on many, many parts of the financial services systems at different banks, that gave me so much exposure to see how it improved risk, how it improved wealth management, how it was able to do, predict the stock market as best as it could, but also give an advantage in algorithmic trading to my customers. I began to think of cities because it brought me back to my interest in development economics. I said, what if you could take these same data infrastructure, these same algorithms, and apply it to the whole city? What could we do? And that's when I went for my PhD in information systems, and I looked at artificial intelligence applied to urban transportation systems. And some pilots that were coming around on car sharing and the circular energy, sustainability. What was this next generation passenger that we would have, or driver? And that was very interesting to me. I was going to go back to New York, and my husband said, let's go to Singapore. So we took our 2 babies, no jobs, no nothing, and came here. And then I launched my data and AI company because I saw there seems to be a big gap here in terms of what's happening relative to what I saw on Wall Street. And that's when I started my data and AI company with an amazing co-founder who did his PhD from the University of Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And we started to take our concept of data and AI to telcos, to banks, to healthcare companies. And we had a lot of resistance 8.5 years ago. But over time, the tide has started changing. People don't expect me to pull out a magic bunny that can do everything. That's not AI. But if you have a discipline with which you systematically build a foundation and build business valuable solutions with data and AI, it actually can really improve your productivity. And if you have enough of these projects running accretively, they can really move your needle on your profitability and P&L that then can make a big splash for your stock price.
I mean, I'm tempted to talk about the MIT study that was published last week, I think, that talked about basically no one's made any benefit out of AI. Are you familiar with the one I'm talking about? Can we detour on that? Let's detour on that, because that literally moved the stock market last week, I think, right? Do you want to talk about that for a second? What's your reaction to that?
I do want to talk about it. And I think even though there have been a lot of people who've said, well, if you really look at it, it was only 59 companies and blah, blah, blah. But I think there's some truth to it, that over 85% of AI pilots fail to scale. So when they say they don't produce real ROI, it means they don't produce ROI that's significant. So if you're going to do a tiny little project with one team and it's going to save you $100,000 a year, maybe, that is ROI, but it's not enough to justify the billions that the stock market is expecting. And so the problem there is that people get excited about these pilots, but they have no way to scale it across the organization because they haven't built the data foundation. Once you have a data platform and you've created that data, it's reusable across many teams. And then some of the AI solutions are reusable across many teams, as is your governance practices and your versioning and operationalization processes. When you do that, and then you have several of your departments moving on, using it, then each of those hundreds of thousands turn into millions of dollars that turn into something that a multi-billion-dollar company can proudly say, the CEO can proudly say at an earnings call. That's the reason they're not getting the ROI. It's because they are rushing to shiny little pilots that have not been thought through, either for their scalability, but sometimes even for their business value. Why are they going for something teeny tiny when they should maybe be looking at something that can really move the needle? It might not sound so great, but it will actually give you the rewards you need. So the criticism is justified, but the reasons, I believe, are also well known.
Asha, I started my career doing IT, large-scale distributed systems automation and management back when we went from having one single mainframe to thousands of distributed systems. You needed a computer to manage the computers, kind of a weird cobbler's child problem, but whatever. Gartner published a study, it must have been close on 30 years ago, that said 80% of IT automation projects fail to deliver the expected business outcomes. My view is what that just tells me, and I suspect if you looked at most projects, 80% of any sort of project will probably fail to deliver expectations because either expectations are too high or it turns out a lot of people are just really bad at project management. Let's be clear, right? So
100%.
I was probably, I was like you, a little unsurprised. I was more surprised that people are surprised that projects don't always deliver results.
Yes.
Have you skipped the last 100 years of business?
But it's because project management, there's a discipline to it.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to follow. It's not rocket science. We've done it. We know it. Just follow it. And I think that's the problem, that you think AI and they're going to allow you to skip over those steps. But no successful company has skipped over doing something meticulously, even if you're doing it at high speed and doing something very innovative. As they say, you can, they move fast and break things, but you still need to move fast systematically.
Yes, exactly right. That's a very good point. Now, I've just started on the book Hybrid Reality. I've got to ask the question before we go too far. What inspired that?
Well, it was literally when I decided to study smart cities, I started looking at it and I realized that, cities, and there was such a big urbanization trend and continues to be in the world. And I wanted to study this intersection of cities and AI, but I realized that it's not just in cities, it's in healthcare, it is in infrastructure, it is in education. And so I and my husband put together this virtual institute called the Hybrid Reality Institute, where we literally started going all over the US and getting experts who were kind of thinking about the long-term impact of data and AI on their particular fields. And as we used to have these salons, it was kind of old school but wonderful. We'd get together in New York and have these salons and have these discussions. And a lot of those people are now right and quite well known in their field. But it was wonderful. And that's why we wanted to expand it from just a city to this is our new reality. We're going to live with AI, and there are going to be some challenges and there are going to be some opportunities. And we wanted to see how it would affect different parts of our life. It would affect the way we work, our relationships, the way our health, the way we actually live in cities and govern ourselves, all the same themes, by the way, that we're talking about today as well. But at that time, it was kind of speculative because AI has accelerated much faster than even we expected, even though we'd all read the singularity is near, but apparently it was nearer than anybody thought.
Let's talk about smart cities because I'm sure the listeners are sitting there. When are they going to start talking about smart cities? When are they going to start talking about flying cars? And I say that deliberately because smart cities is one of those terms that can easily be overloaded, right? Yeah. You could throw it around. A politician could throw it around, a technologist could throw it around and mean very different things by it. So how do you, when you're talking about smart cities, frame it and explain it to different stakeholders?
I frame it exactly the way Singapore frames it. When Singapore, because it's a city-state, when it launched its smart city, it called it a smart nation. So when former Prime Minister Lee launched it, he said a smart nation is a place where the human spirit flourishes. And it was not about technology at all. It's literally, and if you really look at Singapore's approach, it is a combination of technology, yes, but also intentional design, architectural and otherwise, where you are trying to create an environment that provides streamlined services for citizens, but also allows them to live harmoniously together and with nature. And I'll explain these things. But in order to give them the time that they need to develop themselves and spend time on their health and with each other, but also to upskill them with the infrastructure that they need so that they can be ready for the fourth industrial revolution. It's not just AI and data, but it's really on manufacturing, robotics, all of these other sectors that are coming up. And there's a roadmap associated with that. That's what a smart city is really about. It is measured by the quality of life of its citizens. And it's known for its core pillars, right? It's energy, infrastructure, healthcare, transportation, education, security. These are the fundamental pillars. And you could apply AI to all of them. But I like the way Singapore goes about it. For example, if you think about the aging population, right? If you think about aging, and we're one of the fastest aging populations in the world. 25% of us are going to be over the age of 60 by 2030. So how are we going to prepare how our elderly live? So the old school way of thinking about smart cities is, you know what? I'm going to put sensors all over these senior citizen apartments. And then when they fall, then it's going to alert somebody. And then we'll have a pill, because they were coming out with pills at one point where if they don't take their medication, it'll send like a text message. One company was talking about that to their daughter. And then we'll have cameras and we'll do this, and a robot will teach them exercise. And then Singapore said, yes, sure. But how about this? We're going to build districts that are intergenerational. Because why do old people die? They die because of loneliness. So let's talk about that. And that doesn't have anything to do with technology. They also die of accidents in their home. They also die of accidents on the street. So yes, we'll take care of the accidents in the home by creating new seniors, silver apartments in a certain way that are outfitted with the technology. We will create sidewalks where there's a button that you can press if you're an elderly citizen and you get more time to cross the street. But then we'll also design the housing development in a way that is intergenerational, so that when a person who's elderly goes down, they're not far away like you put in some countries, like senior homes are like far, far away. But in the middle, where they're like school children and they're students and they're hustle and bustle, so that they are not lonely. And I think that is such a great way of thinking about it. It takes an interdisciplinary team. Sure, we have there's new districts coming out that are more pedestrian, so that there are less accidents. There's technology everywhere, but you wouldn't know it, you wouldn't see it. Then the new Punggol district, digital district that's coming up, there's automated ways of getting the waste, and it goes through these pipes underneath. And when the sensor picks up that the trash is full, and automatically the robot truck comes and gets it, or it's taken, but it's not obvious. What's obvious is that there are trees everywhere, that people are working, and they're elderly, and the youth and the kids are living together, working together. And right in the middle of the city is a university, so that they are actually piloting some of the things that they're seeing around them. And that's just one example. This is the city that has built a digital twin of the entire city, one of the first ones that did that. Trillions of data sets. So it's very smart. For every bridge that's made, every road that's made, there is an AI and data that goes over its consequences for climate change, for pedestrian kind of walkways, for traffic. But that is not its main purpose. Its main purpose is in service of a better quality of life for its citizens. And I love this aging example because it really brings home how Singapore thinks about a smart city. It's very different. It's technology second, not first.
Yeah, you've reframed it for me completely, because I love it, because it is just that natural. As I say, I want to talk about my flying cars and my to your point, my robot trash collectors and all of those sorts of things. Now, there is an element, obviously, of technology to it. Let's talk about maybe, I don't know whether to start with the data first and the AI and machine learning models second, or whether we start with the models and talk about where the data comes from. I'll let you choose.
It's very fundamental, right? So it may be invisible, but it is what powers everything. So there are a couple of things. First, for any government, they need to, and more governments are doing this. We have an agency called GovTech, the Government Technology Agency, which is a specialized group of design thinkers, product developers, software engineers, data scientists, and their job is to provide the cybersecurity protocols. They approve the cloud, the government approved clouds that are available, GovTech Cloud, and then the hyperscaler clouds that can be used. And then they help to build the solutions such as the ID system, SingPass, that I use to access all government services. It's so easy for me, right? And pay my taxes immediately and look at my retirement fund and even book my doctor's appointment at the hospital and pay through it too. So I never wait in line or anything like that. So that entity is important. Then you would have the data itself that is being used. So any citizen's data has to be protected. And that's very important. Then there's all the sensors. There's sensors and video cameras everywhere. That data is very important because then you can have emergency response systems. You can have traffic control, and you can also have better education management, health management. So the data is taken from all the different agencies, and they get their data directly from the citizens or from the hospitals. We have something called Health Hub now, which is one platform that connects all the hospitals in Singapore. So I can go to different hospitals and different specialists, and then I access all of my records, my x-rays, everything else within a minute. By the way, I took my dad, we were walking out, it was already uploaded, which is amazing, right? So the data is very important. And then you think, well, then the artificial intelligence to improve the services. So for example, if we just stay in healthcare even, now we're beginning to use AI to help to detect people who have more issues in their x-rays and others so that they can be prioritized and they have less waiting time before seeing the doctor. It may seem like a small thing, but it's huge and being tested out because then the right person who urgently needs care gets to see the doctor first. So these are these pilots that are happening across every single department. If you look at security, HTX is the Homeland Security Department. It's the technology, AI, and robotics arm of the Homeland Security Agency. So the Homeland Security Agency, police, fire, everything else. And then you have a tech and AI, very elite AI and robotics tech agency who is taking open source models such as Mistral from France, which is a large language model. They have a partnership with them, and then fine-tuning it for their own needs, for the robot dogs, for the drone detection or drone jamming software, right? For facial recognition and border security so that you can just walk in without ever showing your passport. So these are the three things that are very important, which is your platform, your talent, your data, and the solutions you're building. And then finally, on top of all that is IMDA, which is an agency whose job it is to regulate the AI, right? So right now they're providing this guidance on how to make your AI more aligned with the values and the ethics and the principles that Singapore believes in. And over time, just as we got data regulation, you'll start to get AI regulation as well as the whole world moves toward it. So that's how a lot of cities are coming at it now, where infrastructure is regulated and managed by the government, or even if it's with the private sector, it's audited so that it is secure, where the data is taken and put, even if not centrally, could be federated centrally, but eventually comes and it comes together to provide access to citizens in a way that's streamlined, integrated. Then you have agencies, whether it's HTX or GovTech, they are specialized, elite kind of AI, robotics, cybersecurity experts, specifically whose job it is to create these government services. And then on top of it, you have the regulator who's making sure that there's ethical values, not only in the government, but they're rippling across the private sector as well. But the government is not dependent on other people now. It's increasingly beginning to control, to drive, and to build these AI-powered systems in service of citizens. And I think that's what a smart city is. It places such an importance on it.
And a lot of the topics you just talked about relate back to the sort of the four you mentioned when I asked you about what you've learned about best practices in dealing with data, which is at least coherent. Let's put it that way. I wanted to talk about, you mentioned Estonia earlier, and we're talking obviously a lot about Singapore too. Well, one's a city-state, the other is a relatively small, compact environment that have both, I think, achieved tremendous progress on digitization, and digitization then enables a lot of what you're talking about. Sort of, I'd almost call it the algorithmic city. I recall going to a government conference, must have been 15 years ago or more, where we talked about things like unified health records and digital ID. And one of the public servants said to me, look, there are really two problems with implementing it in the country. The first is the interdepartmental rivalries. And the second was the fact that some citizens don't like the idea of calling up one department and them saying, oh, I see that you've also got this happening as well. Let me help you solve that problem. They like the idea of their government agencies being separate because they're a little bit paranoid. And I think about places maybe like the United States or possibly, I couldn't speak to Britain, but certainly in Australia, where I don't know if let's put it this way, some of the foundational steps required to get that level of sophistication in place, they're not technical problems, they're societal problems. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. I think that the larger the country, the more difficult it is to have a whole of government approach because they're big agencies. But even in Estonia and Singapore, you still have separate agencies because they are specialized in serving one particular sector for the city. It's just that they are integrated system-wise and data-wise as and when allowed by the government. By the way, for example, there's some very private data that one agency is not allowed by law to share with another agency. It's all very well managed. The thing is that there's traditionally been this approach that large cities cannot be smart cities. And I think that's because we think that a smart city is like wholly smart. And, everything is smart, otherwise it's not good enough to be called smart. And I disagree with that. I think that in India, in Africa, you can have smart cities and in places where you're using mobile phones and doing it in some place which is maybe not very sophisticated, but is still getting you the results that you want. And you're either supported by the government as a private organization or nonprofit, or the government itself is providing those services.
Is it another branding problem, going back to our earlier conversation with governance? Should we be calling them smart cities? In other words, it's not smart as this end goal. It's just smarter than it was a year ago.
I love that, Paul. I totally think so. I mean, if you look at Saudi Arabia, for example, right, they have now brought all of their AI efforts under one government-sponsored agency called Humane. And they have now built their own data centers. They have taken chips, inference chips, which are Grok chips, and bought them in. They have taken open source large language models, the OpenAI one, which recently came in, and immediately they started using it, fine-tuned it to their own language and culture, and now just rolled out a chatbot and for their citizens in Arabic. Now, it is a very smart move because now this foundation can power so many of the citizen services they have, and you can see its ripple effect happening. But to say, oh, Riyadh is not a smart city, or Barcelona is not a smart city, I think it's just condescending when there are a lot of smart people in government. I meet people from Indonesia to the Middle East, Africa to the United States to South Asia. And I think this is very backward thinking to think that civil servants or government officials don't know what they're talking about. They're always behind the curve. They're not. They're paying attention. They're very thoughtful. They're calling the right people. It just takes time to It takes time even at corporations that are on the New York Stock Exchange, that are on the FTSE 100, the Australian Stock Exchange.
I want to touch on that, not the Australian Stock Exchange. I want to touch on the fact I've been holding this question off for a little bit, which is the impedance mismatch of timelines.
Yeah.
When you think about tech projects, if you're an agile fanatic, you're talking about shipping a feature every 14 days or something, right? You're talking about really rapid iterative processes. Yeah. Speed is the key. Move fast and break things. You said it earlier. You think about cities. Well, the first thing you don't think about is breaking things. And you certainly don't think about moving fast, right? Results are measured in people's lifetimes. If you're literally talking about, helping the elderly, for example, or the opposite, guiding, children successfully through their youth into adulthood. Talk to me a little bit about how you measure success when you're talking about where success is possibly going to outlive the person who implemented the project.
I think the whole point is to have kind of these milestones, and taking those milestones, for example, if you're going to think about education and you're going to think about, well, the first thing I want to do is I want to make all our teachers aware of what AI can do. So that's a milestone. That's not an easy thing to do. Maybe it takes a couple of months. Then I'm going to start to introduce this personalized AI chatbot, but I want it to be Socratic. So it's not just giving answers, but it's kind of like Khan Academy. It's actually challenging them. So should we take the one from Khan Academy, or should we build our own? Okay, now you can build it reasonably quickly, but then you have these crazy chatbots that are taking children down these horrible rabbit holes. So you have to be very careful. So maybe it should be supervised. There's a lot of thoughtfulness and management of risk that goes in when you're thinking about a city. That is non-negotiable. There are some things that you cannot expose your citizens to, because especially the elderly and the very young, because they are very vulnerable populations and not as digitally savvy as kind of the middle-aged ones. So that in itself requires a little bit of caution. Against this is something other that's happening that's actually going to speed it up. And that's the fact that technology can be done faster now. So there were two reasons it was slow, because people were risk averse and the technology took a lot of time. Now, people are risk averse, but technology can do things faster. So at least on average, you should be moving faster. Because so now you can say, okay, I'll try this out and now I'll test it, but it's my risk threshold. I won't allow this to happen. But if it's like a customer service Q&A answer, what used to take me 6 months can now take me 3 months, can now take me 4 weeks to test it out. Some people even put something together in 1 week and start doing dark testing on a pilot group of users. That can be done. So speed is possible. What you can't do is ignore the risks. So you still have to look at that, and that requires thoughtfulness, and thoughtfulness takes a little bit of time at least and should be given due course. So I think that's the difference now, and that will speed things up.
Last question for you on smart cities, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'll ask for one, but if you think there's more than one, I'll let you make the call on this one. What is the greatest inhibitor, in your opinion, to making cities smarter?
I think it's people, really. It's also the same thing when you come to it's the same thing, the same problem that you have in big corporations. It's especially when it comes to AI, there's resistance, there is lack of understanding. You tell people in a company, oh, this is going to give you 30% more time, and they smile like nervously. You think they'll be excited about that? You have to tell them before you implement it, what are you going to make them do or give them the opportunity to do with 30% more time? Communicate, communicate, communicate. Educate, educate, educate. Don't be like a Silicon Valley tech bro who thinks nobody will understand him. Everybody's capable of understanding this. It's very logical. I hate elitism of any sort. I think people can understand everything, and they will be much more open to it. So if you say, what's the problem in putting these large data systems and AI systems? It's because there's resistance, even in agencies, in large countries, especially large agencies. So there's execution resistance, and then there's adoption resistance. And in both, you need to communicate and reassure your citizens or your customers, your employees, or your government officials that this will actually benefit them and this will actually be useful for them, and that there is an overarching risk management framework with some competent people that will make sure that this does not derail trust or result in some catastrophe.
I think that's beautifully summarized. Are you okay if I keep you for a couple more minutes? I just want to talk a bit about your work. So I admire people who are willing to plant a seedling of a tree whose shade they will never get to sit under. I won't say that your projects are that ambitious but you are paying it forward in a big way with your charity 21C Girls, which I love as a proud father of 2 young women. But also Amplify. I might get you to talk a bit about them. Actually, talk a bit about them first, and I've got a question for you.
So I started 21st Century Girls to teach girls in Singapore the basics of coding and AI. I ran it for 10 years because I felt that there was a cultural bias against girls in engineering and in STEM in Asia. And certainly we found that. We did so many courses where we would ask girls right before they started if they felt that they had a place in the AI revolution, and they would say, well, we see it happening, but it's like a movie that we're watching and we think the boys will be better than us. And it goes to break my heart. Like, why would you think that? Because the boys are just out there like confidently raising their hands, whether they know it or not, right? And the girls would get nervous. And so we started having these girls only groups, and we taught them in 10 weeks, kind of the basics of AI, how to solve problems, how to think about governance. And then they would give whole presentations. And it really was about confidence. Once you have confidence, then you don't care. Then you can go out there and learn more and do more, and your absorption engagement is much more. So that was such a pleasure for me to do. And then I began to see a sea change in Singapore, where girls are now enrolling in computer science. The government was doing so much more universities were doing it. And then I said, well, the other problem is that they enter the field, but they don't stay in the field. It's called the broken rung on the ladder. What happens to these women? Why do we lose them? That's why we don't have enough role models for young women. They go in and they want to see, like, where do I go next? But they're very few because many of them leave. And so the question was, do they leave because of, is it the workplace? Is it because women have so many phases in their life, right? From puberty to getting your period to having having a relationship, the hormones going up and down, having a partner or a child, a niece or nephew, a pet, then menopause, perimenopause, there's no end to it, right? So basically, why are we not helping women, caring for our elders, etc.? So I wanted that time that they take off, and hopefully they're given that, and I always advocate for that, for the flexibility that men and women should both have, actually. But specifically for women, they lose their confidence to come back in this field that everybody says is changing so fast, right? It is, but not so fast that if you're already in it, you can intuitively pick up on a lot of it, right? You can manage it. You can be part of the revolution. And so that's when I started Amplify, which is specifically for mid-career professionals. And I'm giving scholarships to mid-career women from underprivileged or challenged backgrounds, so that they can do it, they can understand it, connect the dots, and confidently go out and go right back in the workplace, or if they're part-time or even full-time, to know they have a place and they deserve to have it. And more than that, they're capable of being superstars in it. And that's what I really believe. And that I don't do a lot of mentoring because I believe this is my form of mentoring. It's better than mentoring. It's really empowering you from within. So that's my vision, mission, and I'm super excited about it.
I think it's fabulous. I did say, you're planting the seeds of a tree whose shade you may never get to enjoy. But have you had any results of either program that give you joy?
We've had so many girls. There were actually some covered by the Straits Times, which is the leading newspaper of girls, that said they are more confident, that they moved from one field to another. Somebody wrote to me from Australia recently and said that she's doing information systems. Some didn't switch, but feel like they understand what's happening around them, because you don't have to be an AI engineer or a technologist to thrive, to know enough so that you can thrive in a company that's using AI and tech. And really, you can remain an accountant, you can remain a graphic designer, you can remain a project manager, whatever you want to do. But you should know that we are now in an era where AI and data are going to be a big part of how companies operate and grow. And if you know that, you're going to be ahead of the curve. And that's pretty awesome.
Such an inspiration. Speaking of inspiring, am I correct in understanding you've got another book coming up, Game Changer?
I do, yes.
Well, we've got to pay some bills now, so let's talk about Game Changer. What can people expect?
Well, it's really about, Game Changer is about businesses. And because I advise so many businesses on how to prepare their workforce and best practices, kind of as we discussed, to really have real results from AI, not the failed pilots that we've been talking about. So that's coming out next year. I'm very excited about it. A lot of what I do is bridge the gap for business executives to understand AI and to connect the dots between what technically can do, breaking it down for them, but also what it can do for their business problems and needs and what other companies are doing. I've noticed when people know more than just their tiny company and their tiny department, but can connect the dots and see infrastructure and geopolitics all about AI and what China is doing and Saudi is doing and Africa is doing and US is doing, they get in the AI vibe and then they put their hand up and now they can just see like ideas are coming to them. And that's powerful. Not just teaching them technically and learning about the next new model of ChatGPT or Claude. I mean, I get it. It's cool. But, let's try to do something with it that makes our lives better and the lives of people around us better.
Such an inspiring mission. I love it. Your enthusiasm, your energy is brilliant. Ayesha, if people are interested in diving deeper into whether it's the work you're doing for women in tech or smart cities or AI, where can they go to learn more?
Thank you, Paul. Well, you can go to my website, ayeshakhanna.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. On my website, I send it out 3 times a week. It goes to over 200,000 people. And it just keeps you updated on AI news and trends and has some fun polls in there. So that's a great way to start getting to learn about AI. And I hope to see you in either my LinkedIn or my newsletter, or however, you decide to pursue this AI journey.
Thank you so much, Ayesha. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun. Thank you.
It really, really was. All right, folks. Well, that's a wrap. So there's a question. What does it mean to make a city smarter for you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them to the comments section, or you can hit us up on LinkedIn. Use the handle @Cloudera with your thoughts. Thank you again to Cloudera for hosting another episode of the AI Forecast. And thank you all for tuning in. No one uses radios anymore. Why do I say that? We'll see you all next week.